Hospitalizations and deaths, unfortunately, on the rise again across the country. We just heard from Dr. Fauci saying around 80 million eligible Americans are still not vaccinated, the very group that could help turn this pandemic around. So, Dr. Poland, I'm going to start with you. I know this is something that you have spent, a long time now really looking into. How do we get the people who are not vaccinated to decide to get a shot?
Yeah, I mean, there are obviously a number of things you can do to nudge them, but fundamentally, for people who reject vaccines, it's not about the data, it's not about the science, it's about misperceptions and fears. And unfortunately, you finally, if you really say we have to have immunization rates at a certain level, you ultimately have to mandate it because you cannot otherwise convince them.
And Caroline, when we were just hearing, your dad there, and you hear him say fear, I think a lot of people are making those fear-based decisions right now, and we've been in this prolonged period of feeling that way.
Absolutely. And we all have a primary and secondary cognitive style in which we take in information through and decision make through. And one of those primary styles is fear based, where we go with the emotion and we go with our fear. And at some level, that makes sense because we have that sympathetic nervous system to alert us to any potential threat that kicks off. And the problem with that is when we kick into that sympathetic fight or flight nervous system, our prefrontal cortex, where that good decision making and executive function comes from, begins to go offline.
And for parents right now, some of them really have to make some very important, could be life-changing decisions for their children. We know that about 50% of the kids who are right now eligible, so we're not talking about the smaller kids, we're talking about your 12 and up kids, but only 50% that are eligible are now vaccinated, even though, kids, some of them are already back in class. So there's still a lot of work to get parents, and is it more information, Dr. Poland? What is it to get parents to understand why they should be vaccinating their kids?
Yeah, information always helps, but I have to say at this point, after 18, 19 months, it's hard to believe that people with eyes to see and ears to hear are not aware of the information and data. What they don't understand is the grand experiment being done with their children. By not wearing masks, by not distancing, by not getting immunized. We had about 200,000 children in this country hospitalized, test positive for COVID last week. We've had about 330 die. This is unbelievable in the face of known efficacy of vaccines and masks.
And Caroline, when we take a look at some of, the parents' reactions and how it really just seems to be so split.
Right. Well, and again, we're decision making out of our own history, out of our own fears, our own values, our own motivation. And I think that it's important as we have this conversation about vaccine acceptance and hesitancy that we get to the story underneath the story. It's not simply that someone is hesitant or rejecting or accepting. There's a whole narrative underneath that I think if we really engage well in conversation with others, we can get to that story and help to process kind of underneath that surface level quick response that we have.